Before America was a nation, it was an idea. An idea bold enough to challenge a king and powerful enough to change the world. 13 colonies along the Atlantic grew restless under a distant crown. Taxes without representation, soldiers in their streets, voices unheard. Protests became resistance. Resistance became revolution. Farmers and merchants took up arms. Free and freedom-seeking men of African descent joined the fight. Even some enslaved men risked everything, hoping liberty might include them. Indigenous nations navigated empires colliding on their lands. Families divided, loyalties tested. From uncertainty came words daring enough to imagine a new nation, that all are created equal. But the American Revolution was not fought only in 13 colonies. Its reach extended to the Gulf Coast, and its impact would be felt far beyond America's shores. This is a story of the American Revolution. For 250 years, the American story has been told through moments of courage, conflict, and conviction. We know Boston, where rebellion erupted in the streets. We know Philadelphia, where independence was declared and a new nation was imagined. One of the war's most fascinating chapters unfolded nearly 1,500 miles away, along the Gulf Coast, in what is now Lafayette, Louisiana. Today, in this one-hour special, we're traveling to destinations both well-known and some you may not expect, that played pivotal roles in the American Revolution. 3 cities, 3 stories, and 1 revolutionary journey that still shapes America today. In Boston, rebellion wasn't whispered. It was shouted. This is where ordinary citizens challenged the most powerful empire in the world. Built in 1713, Boston's old State House once stood at the center of royal power. Here, tensions between crown and colony ignited. The Boston Massacre unfolded just outside its doors. Today it stands as a museum and a defining stop along Boston's Freedom Trail. Believe it or not, I am standing on the site of the Boston Massacre. And right behind me is the old State House. I'm meeting up with Dr. Nat Shidley to learn a little bit more about Boston and its role in the American Revolution. Now, also, you guys, just above me, that balcony is where the Declaration of Independence was first read to Bostonians. Dr. Nat, thank you for meeting me here at the old State House. I look around and I go, my goodness, if these walls could talk. They have so many stories and so much history to tell. But as I think about the American Revolution, what are some of those stories that this building would tell leading up to that defining moment in history?
Yeah, well, this building was the center of the British Empire in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts was one of the most important colonies in the British Empire in North America. And the decisions that were made right here in this building, in this very room where we stand right now, turned Massachusetts from a place that was intensely loyal and proud of their connection to Britain into the leaders of the rebellion against it, and ultimately the drivers of the movement for independence. Here in this space, in 1775, the British General Gage would give the order to send troops out to Lexington and Concord in what would become the first battle of the Revolutionary War. But that was a huge surprise that something like that would happen, because just 10 years earlier, Bostonians took great pride in their connection to the British Empire. There's this change, though, in the relationship between the colonies and the empire that has to do with taxes. Parliament begins to impose taxes in the 1760s, and it raises the question in the minds of Bostonians and colonists everywhere about where the law should be made that governs them. Could they be truly free if Parliament, where they weren't directly represented, was passing laws, imposing taxes upon them? Should those taxes be passed by their own legislatures? And this building is where the legislature of Massachusetts met. And folks like John Adams and John Hancock and many of those figures who we remember were over in that other room giving speeches saying it's not taxes, but the lack of representation that threatens our freedoms.
So what were some of those taxes at the time?
Well, in 1765, Parliament imposes a tax called the Stamp Act, which charged duties on all kinds of printed matter, legal documents, anything that you needed in order to learn the news of the day or to transact something in the course, you were now going to have to pay for. And there are huge protests in the streets. Thousands of people, actually, they march down the street in August of 1765, and they come through the ground floor of this building chanting, "No stamp, no stamp." They march down to the waterfront, to what they believed was the warehouse where stamped paper was being held. They tore down the warehouse, they took the lumber up onto a hill, they burn it in a big bonfire, and they throw an effigy of Oliver into the bonfire. A very clear threat that violence is going to be used to defend their liberties. I want to make sure, though, that we are thinking about the fact that it's not the taxes, it's the representation that is so aggravating to those who are protesting, right? Their question is, whose voice should have a say in when the taxes are passed, right? Boston actually taxes itself quite highly. It's not taxes per se that people object to. It's the fact that Parliament, a body in which they have no voice, is passing those taxes. The governor gets his troops to help return order and restore peace. That only makes things worse. Now people are angry that there's a police force, their own soldiers, right? Our soldiers have been sent here to police us and to treat us as the enemy, right? Folks we've fought alongside in the Great War for Empire against France and the French colonies in North America, and now they're training their guns on us. And those tensions boil over right outside this building, right in the street out here, what was the big gathering place in Boston, in a moment when soldiers fire upon unarmed civilians. And they kill 5 civilians in the street, what comes to be called the Boston Massacre. Wow. And now there's a tradition of resistance that people are raised into. And in 1773, a new act passing a tax on tea is imposed by Parliament. And this one also is not very well designed. It says that ships known to be carrying taxed tea will come into colonial harbors, and it will go into the hands of a set of named individuals who will receive that tea and then resell it. The objective of the protesters is we cannot consent to this tax by allowing that tea to be unloaded from the ships. So the first ship arrives in Boston Harbor in late November of 1773, and the town immediately sends folks to the wharf. They stand guard around it. They prevent the cargo from being offloaded. And they have 20 days to figure out how to get the ship to leave the harbor. Because within 20 days, the tea, by law, has to be offloaded and the tax has to be paid on it. The governor has to give permission for that ship to leave port again, and he won't do that. And we're getting right down to the wire, and on the night of December 16th, it's essentially the 11th hour, it has to be resolved that night, or the tea will be offloaded the next day and the tax will be paid. And the whole town, 5,000 people, gather in Old South Meeting House, just a couple of blocks down the street from here, and they send a delegation up to talk to colonial officials. They send a delegation out to the country home of the governor saying, we've got to get you to give permission to this ship to leave the harbor, and if you don't, something's going to happen, right? And they don't get that permission. They report back that the governor has refused, and a signal's given, the town meeting breaks up, and they're off down to the harbor in order to find the tea on the ships, break open those casks, and dump the tea into the harbor to ensure that the tax won't be paid.
A big tea brew.
That's right, spilling the tea since 1773.
Today I'm at the Museum of African American History here in Boston, on Beacon Hill to be exact. And I'm about to meet up with Dr. Noelle Trent to get those powerful, untold stories that help shape a new nation. Dr. Noelle Trent, thank you so much for having me here today at the Museum of African American History.
Well, thank you for joining us here, Denella.
You were one of the voices that I had to include in this special. And I wanted to get to the story that tells about the Black voices of the American Revolution. Because so many times we think about Paul Revere or Samuel Adams or John Adams. We don't often think, or in schools or in textbook, they never told us about some of these Black voices.
Well, you know, I think what's important for people to keep in mind, especially here in New England, is that there were Black people in New England during the American Revolution. We typically think of the South, where people are enslaved, as being this primary point of where Black people are located. And that is demographically true, right? Like most of the percentage of enslaved Africans are in the Southern colonies. However, there is still a significant number of individuals here in New England, and particularly in Massachusetts, and more specifically Boston, right? So Boston is actually much more diverse than we give it credit for in this revolutionary time period. But it's also a dangerous time for folks. And we can look at the death of Crispus Attucks during the Boston Massacre, right? That he is one of many people who are killed in that moment. He doesn't get as much credit for the moment as we know it today until a little bit later during the abolition, definitely during the immediate aftermath, because essentially what this was that Britain turned its guns on its own citizens. But even as we characterize Crispus Attucks as that, I think it's important to know that he was a community member. He was a sailor. He was somebody's child, right? He had friends. He had people who cared about him. And if we just portray him as a victim, we do not do him justice in the role that he played, that he was existing within us. And there was a reason why he joined with these other Bostonians in protesting against the British. He was fed up, just like everybody else. I don't think everybody just wanted to go and throw things just to throw things. I think people at that point were fed up with what was happening through Parliament, what was happening here in Boston, and they were expressing that. And he, unfortunately, was a victim of that expression. But that also is important to know that we were right there articulating those ideals as well.
Crispus Attucks was a sailor of African and Native American descent whose life and death helped ignite a revolution. On March 5th, 1770, in Boston, Attucks was killed by British soldiers during what became known as the Boston Massacre, making him the first casualty of the American Revolution. His death transformed him into a powerful symbol of resistance against oppression and a reminder that the fight for liberty began long before independence was declared. Crispus Attucks did not live to see independence, but his sacrifice helped make it possible. Now that we've stepped into Boston's revolutionary past, let's experience the city as it lives and breathes today. Boston's story doesn't end in its history books. It lives on in its neighborhoods, its waterfront, and its energy. At the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum, you can actually relive history through a multi-sensory experience, complete with live actors, interactive exhibits, and full-scale replica 18th century sailing vessels that bring the revolution to life. In the Seaport District, innovation meets ocean views with modern dining, art, and one of the city's most vibrant social scenes. For a different kind of adrenaline, step inside F1 Arcade Boston, where you can experience the thrill of racing in a high-energy, immersive environment. Walk the Freedom Trail by day, and by night, discover a city that blends history with a bold contemporary spirit. Boston isn't just where revolution began. It's a city that continues to move forward. Now back to the story of America 250. While Boston burned with protests, resistance was spreading across all 13 colonies. In Virginia, militia companies were forming under leaders like George Washington. In New York, vital ports became battlegrounds for trade and control. In the Carolinas and Georgia, neighbors chose sides, patriot or loyalists, sometimes within the same family. Taverns became debate halls. Town greens became training grounds. This was no longer isolated unrest. It was organized resistance. Ordinary citizens were preparing for extraordinary consequences. The question was no longer whether change would come, but whether independence would be declared. And in Philadelphia, that answer was about to be written. Everyone knows Philadelphia is where America began, but few people know it's also where America was challenged. Today, we're at the Museum of the American Revolution in the heart of historic Philadelphia, where the ideas that shaped America were debated, challenged, and set into motion. Philadelphia wasn't just the birthplace of independence. It was a proving ground for what freedom would truly mean. This is where America's journey continues. Adrian, it's an exciting time as we celebrate 250 years of our country's independence. And to be here in Philadelphia right now is just simply exciting for me. You know, I remember being a young girl and being in school and learning about this city and all of the thought leaders and some of the founders, people like Thomas Jefferson, right? Benjamin Franklin, John Adams. They were all right here in this city 250 years ago. Take me back in time.
I mean, Philadelphia, what a place to be in 1776. So Philadelphia is a port city, so we're right on the Delaware River. We're also a great space for trade because we've got like the breadbasket of America right off on the western frontier. And so people are coming through from all sorts of different places, but also ideas. And then you imagine the infrastructure for that, right? Think about all of the newspapers that are being published and the pamphlets that are being written, the books that are being put out. So this is an exciting place to be where lots of people can come and share ideas. And then just geographically speaking, we are basically smack dab in the center of the eastern seaboard. So whether you're coming from the farthest stretches of Massachusetts, what's now Maine, or coming from places like Georgia and South Carolina, Philadelphia is a place to meet in the middle.
When we think about that period of time, a lot of people in this country in particular think about Black people and their role in the American Revolution. And they tend to think that, well, Black people were only slaves at that time. Now, there were a lot of interesting dynamics, right? You had the British who were recruiting some Black slaves. Come fight with us and we'll give you your freedom. And over here, fight with us as an American and we'll give you your freedom. But at the end of the day, was the outcome freedom for Black people?
Oh man, it is such a complicated moment. It's a moment of chaos, which also means that the revolution is a moment of opportunity. And so what you find is that people of African descent, and there's approximately 500,000 of them on the eve of the American Revolution living in British North America, many of them are looking to try to figure out what is going to be the best path to personal freedom, to community agency, and to support, to being able to determine their own lives and futures. And so you find that there are a number of people of African descent who side with the British because they seem to offer a really strong opportunity for freedom. But then you find that there's other people of African descent who choose to side with the revolutionaries. And what's fascinating about the moment of this decision making is that then over the course of the war, you find people of African descent on either side fighting against one another for the very same thing.
Wow, that's deep. It
It's
took
hard
my
to
breath
imagine.
away for a second there. Now, there is a name that goes down in history, James Forten.
Yeah. James Forten is one of our favorite stories when we think about not just people of African descent during the Revolution, but people who sort of embody the revolutionary spirit. So James is born here in Philadelphia in 1766, and he's born free. So even though the vast majority of people of African descent at this point in time are enslaved, who are living in what's going to become the United States of America, he is born free. And he's here at this moment where lots of people are walking around having conversations about lots of the big ideas of the revolution, right? They're talking about things like freedom and liberty and independence and rights and all of these things. And he seems to have been very excited about all of this. When he's 9 years old, he's standing outside of the Pennsylvania State House when the Declaration of Independence is read publicly for the very first time. By the time he's 14 years old, he has begged his mother, and she has agreed. Finally, you can imagine there's probably a lot of back and forth around it, but she has agreed. She is going to let him go sail on a privateer ship supporting the revolutionaries. Long story short, he is captured by the British on his very second sailing. He ultimately, after almost a year, about 8 months, I want to say, is released from being held captive on a prison ship in New York Harbor, comes back to Philadelphia, and then he has this amazing opportunity to work in a sailmaking loft. It's a loft that his father had worked in when he had still been alive. He had passed on by the time that James Forten was a teenager, but James is able to go work in that sailmaking loft, and he ultimately is able to take over that business, to employ both Black and white sailmakers. And through that, he becomes one of the wealthiest men in Philadelphia, one of the most powerful and influential, and he uses that money, that power, and that wealth to support revolutionary causes, things like abolition, right? Things like women's rights. He is fighting for temperance. He's fighting to make sure that the ideals of the revolution, that all men are created equal and that everybody has equal access to the same opportunities, he uses his power and his influence. And I should mention, alongside his wife, Charlotte Van Dyne Forten, and in the support of raising his children to also believe in these ideals, multiple generations of the Forten family take these revolutionary ideals and through activism, through involvement in a variety of different groups, through education, they go out into the world and they push to make the ideals of the revolution a reality.
He was a true American patriot.
He was a true American patriot, and his name should not be forgotten in Philadelphia or anywhere else.
My name is Dolly Marshall, and I am a historian and preservationist. I am a descendant of James Forten. We are related through my maternal lineage. My great-grand-aunt Sarah Hegeman, also known as Sadie, was married to James's great-grandson George Forten. In today's time, it's very important to know about your family history, to know about your ancestry, from whence you came. Many people don't have the opportunities to have access to archives and go to research centers. When they see someone like me, who is a descendant of someone like James Forten, I am in real time a living, breathing representation of helping others achieve awareness about where they came from. James Forten at one time was the wealthiest man in Philadelphia, but it wasn't just all about money for him. He used his wealth to fund causes, different causes such as the Liberator newspaper and the Underground Railroad. And that's all about generational wealth and building legacy. And young people need to see role models such as James Forten so that they can have examples for themselves, so they know that they can achieve more and do greater things.
Now that we've explored where independence was declared, let's discover how Philadelphia brings that legacy to life today. Philadelphia is a city where history and culture exist side by side. Start at the Museum of the American Revolution, where immersive exhibits bring the nation's founding to life in powerful, unexpected ways. And just steps away, stand before the Liberty Bell, a symbol of freedom that continues to inspire. Stroll through Old City, where cobblestone streets lead to galleries, cafes, and some of the most dynamic dining in the country. And no visit is complete without a stop at Reading Terminal Market, home to the legendary Philly cheesesteak, piled high with thinly sliced ribeye, melted cheese, and all the flavor that defines this city. Now we return to the history that shaped a nation. When independence was declared in Philadelphia, the revolution did not end. It expanded. Indigenous nations navigating shifting alliances as empires collided. Enslaved Africans faced impossible choices, seeking freedom wherever it might be found. Across the Atlantic, global powers were watching. France calculated. Spain mobilized. The war for American independence was becoming international and stretching from northern ports to southern shores and into the Gulf Coast. The survival of this new nation would depend not only on colonial courage, but on global alliances. And along the Gulf Coast, another powerful chapter of this revolution was unfolding. When most people think of the American Revolution, they picture Boston's harbor or Philadelphia's Independence Hall. But what if I told you that nearly 1,500 miles away in what is now Lafayette, Louisiana, America's fight for independence was not fought only in the 13 colonies. Along the Gulf Coast, exiled Acadians and Spanish forces were forming alliances that would help turn the tide of war, weakening British strongholds and securing victories in the South. I'm meeting up with historian Warren Perrin here at the Lafayette Museum Historic Home and Gardens to get the story on the Acadians' role in the American Revolution. Well, hello.
Bienvenue au Musée Lafayette.
Merci beaucoup.
De rien.
Mr. Perrin, when I think about the American Revolution, America's independence, I really think about the 13 colonies that had a significant impact. You know, I think about Boston, I think about Philadelphia, I think about Charleston. I do not think of anywhere in Louisiana. Tell me the story and how Louisiana, in particular, this area where we are today, Lafayette, and the Acadians had a role in the American Revolution?
Yes, the southern third of Louisiana is known as Acadiana, where my ancestors, the Acadians, settled, and today they are called Cajuns. However, the story really begins of America. 16 years before the Pilgrims dropped anchor in Plymouth, my ancestors left France and established the first colony called Acadia in what is now Nova Scotia. France and England fought over this colony constantly, and the Acadians decided we're going to have nothing to do with government. We're going to be independent, we're going to provide for ourselves, and this was based on the information conveyed to them from the Native American called the Mi'kmaq people, who taught them how to live and how to survive and how to prosper. And ultimately, on the eve of the French and Indian War, in 1755, my ancestors were deported because they refused to take an oath of allegiance to the King of England.
Go a little bit deeper because people don't think about, like I said, Louisiana and their role in the American Revolution. So let's talk about some of the battles that they fought for America's independence.
When the war broke out for the American Revolution, Governor Galvez of Spain asked the Acadian to join the Spanish militia, and they were anxious to do so. They finally had a chance to get back at the British for having stolen their lands. So 67 men got on horses and went from Lafayette to New Orleans. They joined the Spanish militia, and they ensued and helped defeat the British at the Battle of Manchac, which was the control of the Lake Pontchartrain, north of New Orleans. They went up to Baton Rouge. They defeated the British there. They got control of the Mississippi River. But the two big battles were Mobile and Pensacola. And ultimately, they were successful. Those forts fell. Therefore, the Gulf of Mexico was controlled by Spain. 4 months later, Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington. The war was over.
Wow. And how do you feel as an Acadian or Cajun, whichever one you want to use right here? 250 years later, we celebrate America's independence.
Truth be known, we shouldn't be here. The British wanted to destroy us. On est toujours en bout, we're still standing and we're still proud. And we're 5 million scattered throughout the world. But I'm proud to be a part and be able to tell the story of my ancestors who struggled so hard to ensure that their unique, independent culture would persist forever.
While touring the Lafayette Museum Historic Home and Gardens, I spoke with Margaret Trahan, who offers a fresh perspective on the enduring legacy of those who fought tirelessly for our nation's freedom. Margaret, as we think about America 250 in this year of celebration, I want to talk a little bit about the Daughters of the American Revolution and its tie to this historic event and moment in time.
Well, the Daughters of the American Revolution was founded in 1890. So you're thinking, what does that have to do with 1776? Because it was more than 100 years later But what was happening in 1890 was a kind of a revival in patriotism. And many of the direct descendants of men and women who had aided in the cause of the American Revolution, those direct descendants, like generations 1 and 2, were passing away. And so it was a concern that we would lose our sense of history and who we were as a young country. And so 4 women got together in someone's parlor and established the Daughters of the American Revolution. And that organization is dedicated to historic preservation, to education of young people in the values of citizenship and what that means. The Daughters of the American Revolution is a lineage society. You do have to be able to trace an ancestor through your family tree back to the American Revolutionary War period, and whether that person fought or assisted the cause, you have to be able to prove that.
And for me personally, I became interested in the Daughters of the American Revolution as a part of, I was doing genealogy research on my family. And I came across one of my cousins on social media who was also always posting about genealogy. And I saw that she was a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And I was like, wow. I contacted her with more interest, and she's like, yes, we are direct descendants. You know, we have a patriot who fought, you know, in the American Revolutionary War under Galvez. And that is Pierre Ri'chard, right here from Louisiana. Who knew?
Exactly. And the reason why we do know, the reason why she was able to uncover that was really through the work of Robert Churchill from New Orleans, who went to Seville, Spain, and transcribed the records of all the militiamen who fought under Bernardo de Galvez.
That is amazing. For anyone watching and they're looking at you, they're looking at me, and they're saying, how do I become a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution? How do they join?
Well, they can go to the DAR national website, dar.org, and fill out a membership interest form. And then depending on where they're living, that chapter closest to their residence will be notified that there's an interest. And then each chapter has someone who does help with the genealogical research, and they can assist them in uncovering any connection they might have to the American Revolution.
I'm a 9th generation descendant of Pierre Ri'chard, a soldier who fought during the American Revolution with the Spanish forces as part of the Opelousas, Louisiana militia under Bernardo de Galvez, the Galvez expedition, driving the British forces from the lower Mississippi Valley at Natchez and Baton Rouge. Long before Louisiana was a part of the United States, before it was even on American soil, my great-grandfather was defending the Gulf Coast, helping weaken British strongholds and protect a fragile fight for our independence. But when I learned his story, I realized that the revolution wasn't just something I wanted to report on, but it's something I come from. Now, my great-grandfather, Pierre Ri'chard, was white, but in Louisiana, during the American Revolution, he was not alone in service. Many free and freedom-seeking men of African descent also joined the military, as they had decades before Galvez's arrival. Some earned their freedom through exemplary service. Others, already free, rose to prominence in society and politics because of their courage and sacrifice. Their contributions are part of this Gulf Coast story too. Because of Pierre Ri'chard's service, I'm a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. But more than a lineage society, that connection is a reminder. A reminder that freedom is inherited, but it is also protected. This isn't just history for me, it's heritage, it's responsibility, it's a legacy that I carry with pride. Now that we've uncovered Lafayette's powerful role in the Revolution, let's experience the culture that continues to define this region today. Lafayette invites you to experience a culture shaped by resilience, heritage, and celebration. At Vermilionville, step back in time to explore Acadian history through restored homes, live demonstrations, and a peaceful boat ride along the bayou. For family-friendly adventure, visit Louisiana, where wildlife encounters and outdoor experiences bring a different side of Louisiana to life. And throughout the region, music, food, and community create an atmosphere you won't find anywhere else. From Cajun rhythms to unforgettable local flavors, Lafayette isn't just a place to learn history, it's a place to feel it. 250 years later, the revolution still speaks. It challenges us. It unites us. It reminds us that freedom is both a right and a responsibility. The American Revolution was a collective effort, diverse voices, different perspectives, united by a shared hope for something greater. And 250 years later, our nation continues to grow because of that very same spirit, and the responsibility that comes with it. It does not belong to one colony, one city, or one generation. It belongs to all of us, because the story of America is still being written. And if you want to feel that story, stand where rebellion ignited in Boston, walk the halls where independence was declared in Philadelphia, and discover the Gulf Coast alliances that helped secure freedom in Lafayette, Louisiana. Visit these cities to learn our history, to meet the people who carry it forward, and to experience the vibrant communities they've become. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'm Denella Ri'chard, and I'll see you on our next television special, where we continue to explore history through travel.